wait another 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Be respectful of your time. And I still recall many years ago, the chair of the planning board in Brevard told me that the way to start a meeting on time was to start on time. So I'm trying to be close to that. Again, I appreciate the time all of you have taken to be part of the steering committee. And I know we had a question about what you'll be doing. Well, the work really starts now with the review of some of the information you've been given and providing some direction to us, but we'll go over that in a bit more detail. It's agenda item number 7. Has anyone done anything exciting since the last meeting? I guess not. Well, Linda went to
I was on
Seattle.
the West Coast for 2 weeks. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Linda, where'd you go?
I spent some time in LA and Santa Barbara and Olympic Peninsula, outside Seattle.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty area.
It is, it really is. Yeah.
It is. I went to Big Bend National Park and went camping and hiking and driving through the area of Texas, well, all of Texas pretty much made me realize how lucky I am to live in Western North Carolina. But driving through the area around Midland and Odessa, the oil refinery section made me very happy to live in Western North Carolina.
I took the kids to Keystone out in Colorado and we skied for a few days, but it just reminds me how soft our mountains are comparatively, and how old and rounded and weathered and serene we are versus the jagged Rockies.
Yeah, it's much more dramatic and
Yeah, for sure, right?
Arching kind of, out there.
I almost got a sense when I got back that things are more manageable here. Like when you go, it's kind of like going in a crowded and loud room and you come back to where it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like where you're at today. So at least at this point, I'm go ahead and get started. Just welcome everyone, and maybe there'll be a few others who will join us later. But to provide a quick status update on the project, we had our first community meetings, and there was some questions about the lack of a presentation at the open house at the French Broad Academy, and that was a decision of the staff, Linda, me, Kenny Armstrong, and Adrian, and trying to negotiate public meetings during the pandemic is challenging. And I think we've learned that and agreed that the next time we have any type of community meeting, even though it may be a drop-in, we will provide a presentation, probably at a couple of times, announcing the times for those presentations and the publicity about the drop-in meeting. We have completed the demographic information about Woodfin. Linda did that. We've written the plan intro and the overview of the infrastructure, which all of you have received. Have I developed some draft character area descriptions, overview of the infrastructure of the town, and are about to wrap up the survey. And that survey information will form the basis for a lot of our recommendations and goals of the plan. When we get to that part of the meeting, you'll see that the responses are pretty strong in some areas and give us some really good direction on what the goals and recommendations for the future development and growth of Woodfin should be. So we're very fortunate that the number of people who responded is as high as it is. It's quite a good turnout. Linda, do you want to provide a quick summary of the drop-in at the French Broad Academy?
Sure. Am I muted? Okay, I'm on. So yeah, we had a strong but not too large of a turnout. We had a lot of the folks that were on the steering committee or just got appointed to or are current town commissioners. So we had a good representation from the town and town staff. And I didn't have access this morning to the attendance list, but I recall that we probably had about 15 people on the list. And so we did get some folks. We wish that we had more, but that's how it is. I think a lot of people were still reluctant to come out. Just 1 second, I'll pull up my notes that I was going to share. Yeah, so I think Gerald described that we had a nice set of posters, and I think you may have seen them if you've been to town hall or came out to the meeting to kind of be there in lieu of a presentation. We greeted people at the door, introduced ourselves, showed them how we had the room set up, and kind of followed up with questions and comments and as needed with individuals. So that's the format of the meeting. We shared some input that we're just like, we've done with you, shared some input that been received, and then offered opportunities for input. And so the main place that we heard, the main things we heard about were some of the priorities. The highest priority that was had the most votes was about improving public services, police, fire protection, garbage collection, and parks and rec through a tax increase. But there were also comments that the services, the workers were great, they just want more services. And then improving transportation infrastructure, including bike and pedestrian facilities, was the next highest priority. And then protecting natural resources and environmentally sensitive areas was next after that. And then focusing on economic development and job creation. We didn't have lots and lots of input, so there's not a lot of weight to all this, but it confirms a lot of the things that we're hearing in other ways and from the surveys. There was there was interest from a few people in other comments, and a few people noted that really no need to either build new or modernize the town buildings, the government buildings, the town hall, the police, the community center. So maybe modernize them where they are, or find a new place for them and build some new ones, or modernize, rehab something. So that was expressed. I think the main thing, that I think we need to focus on for future input, in addition to what Gerald mentioned, was, deeper outreach into the Latinx community. We did try to do some of that in a couple of different ways before the meetings, but we didn't see a lot of that materialize into input. And then just kind of try to get some community leaders who could really help us get into some of that that group of people and others that aren't being really fully represented, and get some help to get input from those groups. And then also we probably are going to look at a different setup for meetings where there's maybe multiple meetings and or separate meetings to go where people are and make sure we do hear from them. That's all.
That's a lot.
And at the virtual meeting, we had about a half dozen attendees. A lot of the same comments that Linda mentioned: the need to better control development and growth, protect the natural resources of the town, and also to continue the development of the recreational facilities, taking advantage of the French Broad River, improving pedestrian and bicycle connections throughout the community. So I think we're getting consistent feedback regardless of the avenues we take to get that feedback. The survey, the virtual meeting, the drop-in meeting at the French Broad Academy. So it's giving us a pretty clear picture or direction for the goals and recommendations, which will be developed later. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Will for a few minutes to talk about the vision statement and guiding principles, because these will be the foundation upon which the goals and recommendations will be built. So Will, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm about 2 minutes away from the school, so I'll hopefully be able to join video in just a minute. But I took the comments from the synthesis.
Well, can I interrupt? I don't know if others are having this problem, but I'm having a real problem with hearing you with your audio. So what I may do is I skip ahead to the survey update and go over that while you get in and get set up at your computer, if that works okay for you. Okay, I'll do that. Let's see. And with that, I'll start talking about the survey update. And go back to the beginning. And, you know, as I mentioned just during our welcome, the response on the survey has been very good. At this point, we have about 650 responses, with about 450 of those, 442 being complete and 206 being partial. And the partial means that not all questions were answered, that they may not have answered the last few questions regarding filling, which were fill in the blank questions, that what they would like to see and what some of the major challenges are. There was a pretty good breakdown of a very positive breakdown with regard to their residency or owning a business. And Woodfin, almost 75% of the respondees were Woodfin residents, and about 7% were Woodfin business owners, meaning that over 80% of the respondees either lived in Woodfin or owned a business there. So that's a real connection to the community. Yeah. And with regard to how long they've lived, owned a business in Woodfin, a bit over half have been there for less than 10 years, and a little less than half have been there more than 10 years.
I think it's 41% have been there for 5 to 10 years and over.
Yes, and there were 19% who don't live or own a business in Woodfin, but have a connection to Woodfin, either maybe working there or living close to Woodfin. We had a number of respondents who apparently live close to Woodfin and frequent Woodfin, but do not live in the town itself, nor own a business there. Do something here. So this is the bar chart showing their relationship to the town. And if at any point any of you have questions about the responses on the survey, please let me know. And I thought this was interesting. You know, some of the comments like affordable North Asheville, they're wanting access to Asheville, but not did not want to live there, which speaks to the quality of life in Woodfin and what the residents like. And we had a lot of responses, and they also like the forested areas along the river, the lack of I guess urban type development in Woodfin, and the access to natural areas and open space that Woodfin provides. And
Could I say something?
yeah, so yes, please.
So it seemed, I thought the responses were great. And I felt like they were like really clear. It was really clear what the priorities, not just in how people rank things, but like where the percentages lay, you know. And so like the lowest priorities, according to the respondents, is development, right? Woodfin
Right.
growing in terms of attracting more people here, or even catering to tourism. And then the highest priorities were preserving what we have, like green space, and trying to make things a little more pedestrian friendly so we can rely less on cars and things like that. One thing that was surprising to me, and I looked this up in census data already, but our home ownership is just at 62%. And I wondered if there was any way we could look into that particular thing to see if that's related to the rising presence of short-term rentals and investor-owned properties in Woodfin, you know, where people maybe used to be homeowners and now they held onto their property and are renting it out and moved into Asheville or somewhere else. And I just say that because that's exactly what is happening in my neighborhood, is that people aren't selling their houses, they're just now renting them short term.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. We'll try to look into that more.
And I have one question related to that too. Are we even allowed to, as a township or whatever, allowed to create like an investor penalty on home sales? So like homeowners, people are going to reside in the home, wouldn't pay the penalty, but then people maybe who are just wanting to develop or have a commercial, I don't know if that's illegal.
Yeah. I'll look into that. My immediate response is that we can't address the whether a property is rental or owner occupied. The town can place stricter standards on short-term rental, which may address some of the problems. Because I know, and I'll speak. My wife and I are guilty of what you just mentioned. When I met her, she owned a home in Woodfin, and that was many years ago, and we kept that home. We lived in it in the past couple of years for a year, but because of the size of the home, we bought another home, but we still maintain that as a long-term rental. There were short-term rentals around us, and we just felt that our fondness for Woodfin prevented us, and also realizing the need for rental property and people to have long-term residency in Woodfin. We've rented it as a long-term rental. But we're a guilty party there. Again, we'll do some research on whether there's a penalty that can be attached to rental properties. But again, I don't believe that.
I would just say short-term rentals. I think
Okay.
anyone who's holding a long-term rental is doing something wonderful for low-income people in town, because it is impossible to find a long-term rental. Just different experience.
Yes, well, and that's something that could be, you know, a recommendation of the plan. I can speak to Adrian and the new town manager about that, because I do think there are pros and cons to short-term rental, and most of the cons come with them being in single-family neighborhoods and taking away from the rental availability or even home ownership availability in the community. Keep going here.
Hey, Gerald,
Yeah.
Hazel has her hand up. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, no, I don't, because I'm screen. Are you guys seeing my screen?
We're seeing
Yes.
the agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. We get, I'm sorry.
You'll probably have to unshare your screen and
Yeah.
then reshare if you've got that open in a different tab.
I did, and
So
Didn't
while we
understand.
figure that out, maybe Hazel could go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Hazel. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand up.
Unmute, unmute.
Your audio's not working.
You're still muted.
Unmute.
Okay, there you go.
Can you, now can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, great. So speaking of short-term rentals, what are the current regulations that we have in Woodfin, if any?
That's probably a question that can better be answered by
Can I?
Aiden. Yeah.
I'm sure there aren't currently any regulations because the General Assembly in North Carolina overturned or took away, that's better, a lot of the control. And I have a neighborhood with newer homes that are probably valued at least 700,000 that are whole house Airbnbs because they're charging so much, they're making money. There's a court case, apparently another one, that is pending, and Adrian told me that we're not able to do much until we know the outcome of that court case. But boy, it is a big problem all over Woodfin. Even, you know, in neighborhoods that are older, they've turned houses into Airbnbs, whole house Airbnbs, which is much worse than homestays, you know, where somebody's at least supervising people. But you know, I don't know. It'd be wonderful to know how many are in Woodfin. I bet it's a big number.
Mhm.
We can look into that, and I'll do some research into the and talk with Adrian about the legal challenges to regulating Airbnb.
There was at least a process where, and I say this because like when I now that I own a home in Woodfin, when I travel on the weekends, I've Airbnb'd my house for the weekend. And there was a application process, something we had to do, and I paid a fee. But as far as like what happened with that, I'm not sure. So there should be some kind of paper trail.
In Woodfin, okay.
We actually just got a public records request for all of the short-term rentals in Woodfin. And there's good news, bad news. Before we implemented our new development software like a month or two ago, or I guess it's back in December, there was the short-term rental permits that were issued weren't really kept or tracked. There's no database of them, so that information doesn't exist. But with the new system, everything since I think January that has requested to be a short-term rental is in that system. So it is tracked now with all the stuff we had. And everything Glenda said about the court cases is absolutely correct. So we're just kind of waiting for all that dust to settle before we can actually implement anything, or if we're allowed to implement anything.
Brian, do you know how many have been permitted just since January?
I believe it's 3.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the short-term rental? That's a good point, and it does increase the cost of housing, and does, as Amanda says, reduce the available housing stock for both renters and homeowners. It is an issue not only in Woodfin, but I think across the state and probably the nation. Back to the survey, looking at the age chart, the pie chart. It's interesting that's an almost even split between those under 54 and those over 55 and over in terms of responses. The two greatest age ranges in terms of responses were those people 35 to 44 and the older folks 65 to 74, with about an even split. But we got a pretty good representation of all age groups, except those 24 and under who were pretty low in terms of responses, and that may be because they didn't feel comfortable or aren't really participating in the process much. And we may want to try to reach out to some discussion of trying to get input from students, and we'll continue to work to address the getting responses from younger folks in the community.
Gerald, we did have all our staff and students complete the survey, so there should be around, at least at the boys program, around 72 students.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay. And, you know, the answer to the question, what should be the town's highest priorities, Woodland grows or changes, is fun to mention with regard to the drop-in meeting at the French Broad Academy, the protecting the natural areas and managing growth. That was reflected also in the survey. As you see, the top ranked issue was protecting natural resources in environmentally sensitive areas, with managing population growth and new development coming in a close second. And then just a little bit behind was improving the transportation infrastructure, including bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Number 4 was expanding access to parks in the French Broad River. Any thoughts or questions with regard to this? With regard to the 6 most important land use and development priorities for the town of Woodfin, again, the top one was protecting steep slopes and floodplains. It's a bit easier to see these on this with regulating undesirable land use coming in at almost 70% of the respondees wanted that as a priority. The number 1 was, again, protecting steep slopes and floodplains from development encroachment. 81% of the respondees identifying that as a top priority. 76%, almost 77%, wanting an update of the zoning ordinance to better manage development. About 62% wanting improved process and procedures for development. So protecting the natural features of the community and better regulating development are, again, the top priorities in terms of land use and development. Next question. Or any thoughts or comments on that one?
And don't you think that the Bluffs issue created a lot of those responses? I mean, it just seems, because when you compare this to Buncombe County's survey, which had housing as the #1 priority, it just seems like we are influenced a lot by that issue.
Yes, I think that's entirely correct. We may, this is a question for the steering committee. Should we realize that has skewed the results and try to adjust in any way? How can we reflect the impact of the Bluffs on the responses and do it in a way that's credible and realistic?
Well, I would say as a social scientist that there's no way that you can extract that experience from people's, even if we redo the whole survey in a year, right? So
Right.
I wouldn't think that while that did certainly probably have some influence, it wouldn't have ideologically reoriented people that much in terms of now they think that Bluffs are a priority when they never thought it was before.
Except people were driven to complete the survey because of the Bluffs. I mean, I still maintain there are many people out there that haven't filled out the survey that are, you know, much more in need of housing than the survey represent.
Okay. I think one comment I have is that housing is such a critical issue throughout the county, including all the municipalities, that we will be well advised to consider that as a major issue throughout this planning process.
Good.
Next one, with regard to economic development priorities, yeah. Leveraging natural resources for outdoors. Again, it's natural resources and development come in at the top with 71% leveraging natural resources for outdoor recreation tourism, almost 68% encouraging new dining, retail, and entertainment in Woodfin. And then the next 80% encouraging redevelopment of underdeveloped and rundown properties. And this is interesting in the wide range of comments we got for the open-ended questions addressing some of the rundown properties in the town was a significant comment. And so that provides some opportunity for development and redevelopment without impacting the undeveloped properties in town. Is something we need to address in the plan. How do we encourage redevelopment of underdeveloped properties without creating challenges from the owners of those properties? Something for you as steering committee members to think about. And again, another one was evaluating the development potential best use of publicly owned properties such as Craigie Prison and the old landfill, which provide opportunities for redevelopment, but also challenges to redevelopment, especially with the landfill and the environmental issues that may be present there.
There are some federal and state incentives depending on the, I guess, party in control, but for redeveloping a brownfield site, you can get grants from the Land of Sky Council, I believe, and but those are currently on hold. But there are some, state and federal level incentives, especially for brownfield sites.
And we can look at that. Linda has some contacts at Land of Sky, I believe, don't you, Linda?
Sure, I do. Yeah. The Land of Sky has helped Woodfin and other places get those brownfields grants from the federal government and the state. And there's a state coordinator in the Land of Sky offices, so there's good resources there to explore that.
I have a question. Do we have the ability to know how many homes within Woodfin and businesses too actually are on Woodfin water and sewer?
I believe so.
I think so.
And that's something I'll ask Joe Martin at the Woodfin Water District about the water and try to find. I'll have a couple of contacts with MSD and I'll try to find the answer about sewer service also.
Gerald, I have a quick question, sort of straddles the infrastructure and economic slides. And I don't remember the survey because it's been so long since I took it, but it seems that one of the missing pieces, particularly in relation to the land use character areas document, is the discussion of town center as an important piece, keystone piece of this.
Yes, I think that's a good question. A lot of the respondees, especially in the open-ended questions, talked about the need for a town center. And there is in the character area a town center character description. And when we get to that, I'll reiterate this question, but the key question I have about that is where should that be? And we'll get into that in more detail because from the issue of a town center, and you're quite right, it did come up quite a bit in the open-ended questions. Back to the infrastructure, improving and upgrading existing infrastructure to meet the needs of existing development came in very high at 88.5%. Improving street maintenance, replacing aging infrastructure. So a lot of the priorities there clearly reflected the need to address existing infrastructure issues and challenges. And improving transparency, I think the town is certainly moving in this direction with improving transparency and communication about different events and activities that occur in town hall.
Gerald,
Yes. Yes.
disregard, I'll ask you later.
Pardon?
I said I'll ask you later. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Transportation and mobility, a lot of emphasis on pedestrian and multimodal opportunities, and whether in downtown or along the existing street system or along the French Broad River, providing improved connections to the French Broad. And there was one, let's see, down here at the bottom of the screen, to connections to Weaverville and Asheville with multimodal bikeways or pedestrian facilities. There are a lot of emphasis on multimodal, with the access for bicyclists and pedestrians being the most desired improvements to the transportation infrastructure. Parks and recreation, continued development of existing parks along the river or proposed parks, maintenance of existing parks. And again, providing bicycle and pedestrian connections to the French Broad River. So the opportunities that we need to look for, how to provide those multimodal connections and continue to improve and maintain existing parks and community development. The top 4 items included hosting festivals and different type of events along the French Broad, improving the appearance of street corridors through landscaping and lighting. And creating a welcoming, inclusive atmosphere that celebrates diversity. The town is certainly on the right path with that. And this, I'm not going to go into detail with these open-ended questions. I'll just give you a quick overview that there were the small town feel of the community feel of Woodfin, and the access to the French Broad River and natural features for some of the key things here. As you can see, we got a lot of responses to the open-ended questions, and they do tend to skew into certain patterns. Again, the access to outdoors, the small town feel, and they need to address development regulations and protect what is unique about Woodfin, including its natural features. It's just any thoughts or comments on these general questions and responses? I'm going to go to the next item on the agenda, skip back to Will, and let Will take over with regard to the vision statement and guiding principles.
Great, thanks, Gerald. Sorry, I was breaking up earlier. Do you have that current copy? Because I think Adrian has one, or.
And I may or may not, because I'm on the Woodfin's Park and Greenway Committee. Every time I try to get on the Teams page, excuse me, to that one, it says I don't have authorization to be on the steering committee's Google Team page. So I can pull up the one I'm able to access.
I've got the Teams version. I think I can share my screen.
Okay.
And I think I want to make sure I've got the correct version, because I don't know if Adrian did anything with the version I sent her, but I think it'll be close enough. Do you want me to just try to share my screen?
Yeah, try to share your screen and see if that will work. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is that showing up for everybody?
Showing up
Great.
for me.
Okay. So was saying earlier that I reviewed all the feedback that people put in the other teams document, and I did my best to try to sort of synthesize and capture all the ideas. And then I'm a big believer in kind of boiling it down to as short as possible. And so we started with a mission statement for the town of Woodfin that you can see right there. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit, but I won't read it out loud unless someone can't see it. I'm not sure how to zoom on this, but that's what we came up with. And then I shared this, by the way, this whole document with Gerald. And when he got back from Big Ben, we kind of went through it and just tried to get it in a format that y'all could react to and make any changes there. So as you can see, the mission statement's followed by a statement of values. We thought that added some specificity and sort of painted a clearer picture of what we're trying to do. We tried to start, we did start each sentence with a verb. I believe that's stronger. So you can review those. And then I think maybe it was Amanda, someone kind of shared, I think it was town of Cary, or there were a couple of examples of smaller towns similar to the size of Woodfin that we kind of reviewed as case studies and tried to get some ideas from them. So some of these.
Boy, I would shy away from Cary.
Cary. I don't know if it was Cary, but there were a couple of different ones. And came up with these. And then the vision statement. So this is kind of the 20 years from now piece. And then the guiding principles, I think, is not quite finished, so I won't pull all of that up. But my understanding is that this is in the Google team, or I'm sorry, the Microsoft Teams drive. And I think people should be able to comment on it. That might be the easiest way, but if Gerald, if we want to have people do real-time comments and take notes, I don't know, I guess maybe initial reactions, or people can review the document and then comment.
Will, can we get a copy of this?
Yeah, and it's maybe I'll just email it.
Teams, right?
It is in the Teams drive, and I don't know if everybody can access that.
I do not have access to that.
Okay. Yeah. I'll is that okay, Gerald, for me to email it out?
Oh yeah,
or just as a PDF, I guess, or a Google Doc, or
either one. And if you could copy me on that, or do you have everyone's email address? Well,
I think isn't it in the latest email for the invite for this event and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably.
I think
Gerald, is my information corrected in that most recent information?
See, there's there. I'll make sure of that I'll send your
Scott at olivet.com. Scott, I've got
olivetnc.com.
olivetnc. Got it.
Thanks.
Scott, is that why you can't access Teams right now too?
I would guess so. I've just, Gerald and I've
yeah.
kind of been playing bounce and forth, just trying to get it right. So if that does fix it, maybe it will. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. It should, Scott. And if it doesn't, let me know.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments regarding the vision statement and the draft guiding principles?
So we should send our comments to Will. Is that?
Or copy all on your comments. Just respond to all, and we'll all take a look at them when you make comments.
Is that going to work for people? I mean,
to make comments?
I know.
I mean, it's just kind of messy to do that. That's all. It's cleaner if you could be just commenting into the document, or I don't care.
The second one, she's wise, because it's still a lot to fill all that email. It's easy just to comment on the document too.
Yeah. If you go to edit or review on your on your homepage and just,
I know if I share this as a Google Doc to all the people here and set it up where you are only a commenter, that way people can't accidentally or intentionally start to edit it. But that way people could comment, and then we can look at those and reply to the comments and then resolve them as they're addressed.
Well,
I
that's
have
how we do
also-
it. I like it. It's easier that way. I think a lot of
Yeah, I've
folks
struggled with the Microsoft Teams. I just it's a lot more steps for me. But if it needs to be in Teams, I can go that route. But I know that if I send from my school address to y'all, it'll allow you to comment.
I think you guys have done a great job. I just have one comment I'll send to you, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, thanks. I guess one question maybe for y'all or for me, to me, the mission statement is the town of Woodfin. The statement of values, do we need to clarify if this is for the planning committee or is this town of Woodfin? Because we got a vision statement for the town of Woodfin, but if the mission and statement of values are really geared more towards this committee or the town in general, that's my only thought during this process was kind of, does it apply to both or do we need to delineate between the two?
it's
I
for
think
this.
so.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go on.
I just think both. Why would you limit it?
Well, I think they have two specific uses. I mean, one is kind of the rules of what we're looking to do here, our statement of values for this committee, and one is an overreaching town. And I think those are two completely different mission statements, more or less.
Wouldn't you want the leadership of the town, though, the commissioners and the staff and that to embrace these things? I mean, also?
I
think it can
personally
be.
thought it was the document for the town.
Right.
You know, to me, the committee is a much more, not restricted, but a much narrower focus, in my opinion.
And for the purposes of this project, we need something for the community with regard to the vision statement. I think the leadership of the town would certainly be happy to hear the mission statement and the values that this committee sees as appropriate for the town as a governmental entity. We also need the vision statement to guide us in developing this plan, which is more oriented towards the community than the town government or administration.
So I think this does it. I mean, it technically says Woodfin right here.
Yeah.
And then the statement of values supports that mission statement, which references Woodfin. And then the vision statement is about Woodfin. And I think it's holistic or whatever you want to call it enough to guide the committee as well is sort of what I'm hearing. But
Yeah.
I'll shoot this out right after this meeting as, like I said, I'll share it as a Google Doc. You should be able to access it and comment, not edit, but you can comment, and then that way it doesn't get altered until there's a review of it, and we can iron out any wrinkles that way, and I think have a pretty good consensus on what that should be.
I think that will work great. I appreciate your effort on this and your work on this, Bill, and those
Yeah.
who have helped you. And if you could stop your screen sharing, I'll start again with mine. Let's see.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Go to the agenda real, see what's, okay. Stakeholder interviews. Linda, it's yours, and I'll stop. Do you want me to pull up the document,
I'll
What
tell
you
you,
see?
I was gonna just make a few comments and then I can share my screen if I'm allowed to.
I think you will. I'll stop
Okay.
my sharing and you'll be able to.
Because I don't want to, we've been talking about a lot of things that overlap a lot with all the input that we've been getting. So Adrian and I interviewed a number of folks, and so I summarized the ones that we've completed. And they include interviewing representatives from the residents that also serve on the Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee, the Woodfin Y, Kirby Recycling, Woodfin Elementary School, French Broad River Academy, French Broad River Outfitters, and the Buncombe County Parks and Recs Advisory Board. And then Zen Tubing was another outfitter. And so that's the group of folks that I've summarized information for. I know Gerald's had interviews with a lot of the utilities folks and the infrastructure organizations and some of that kind of those kinds of things. And those are summarized in a different place with some of the data. So a lot of the same things, you know, we asked similar questions. We asked what do you love about Woodfin, what your favorite things are. I think they reiterate what we've heard. I guess I'd call out maybe, you know, just the small town feel and the small community and the great sense of community definitely was expressed over and over again. And good relationship with town staff and from businesses and individuals. So some good partnerships and the whole thing around the river access and riverfront. Let's see, now we just talked about the vision. So I'm going to comment on that related to the input. Maybe I'll pull that one up just so you can see that part. I don't want to just get too many. These are all words. There's not a presentation, you know, no graphics in this. So I didn't want to just get too many words up there, but I'll go ahead and share some of this and just try to focus in on. There we go. So now can you see the vision for the future at the top there?
Yes.
So yeah, so some of the these are more specific, I think, probably than what you're talking about for a vision, but a lot of it, you can see that it's, you know, continued variety of land uses, you know, respecting all the different things that are there today. I think what I heard that was it might be coming up down below, but this whole the strong community and really trying to maintain and build that and create more of a connected community. So I think y'all know what a lot of your assets and strengths are, and this is repetitive from what we've heard already. I'll just leave them up there for a minute so you can look at that. And as well, I think you understand a lot of the issues and challenges. So I'll kind of put those up there for a moment. I think there's maybe more balance here from what you might hear in the survey in terms of support for balanced growth that really respects the different needs of the town and the different types of land uses, but having consideration, you know, of what's here as we think about accommodating new development. The one thing that came out, I interviewed the principal at Woodfin Elementary, and she said that it was the access to childcare and lack of after-school care that was the biggest reason people were sending their kids to other places rather than Woodfin Elementary, which I didn't realize that. All right, this is a different Airbnb issue related to the outfitters. There's a whole other issue with that, which is not really related to what we were talking before. I'm going to send this out so you can read through this afterwards. But I think the ideas and comments maybe you might be of interest right now. And I organized them into those that were related to development. And there's a lot of comments around, you know, kind of the natural amenities, you know, to be preserved, and appearances. I mentioned the adjacent land uses. You know, there's opportunities along the river that the town might want to be looking for redevelopment or making it more attractive for redevelopment, like we talked about with the brownfields or something else. There's a revenue opportunity coming up with permits and fees for river access and trailer parking and that kind of thing. Transportation issues, I think these are not probably new to y'all. More pedestrian friendly, better transit opportunities for people that work and need to get around, and maybe thinking creatively about handling traffic flow, like some of the things they've done in the River Arts District in Asheville. Town staffing and funding are kind of goes between these 2 pages. Succession plan for retaining town staff. Really starting to think and plan now for park employee that could work on programming and maintenance after the construction's over with. And additional fundraising opportunities to keep up with all the needs that are coming up. And then creating stronger community and identity. And I think this relates to the town center discussion, really creating more connections. The principal at Woodfin Elementary was really strong on this. I think it's got good connections with the Y, with a couple of the neighborhood associations, especially with the Reynolds Mountain community and the New Life Baptist Church, I think is the name, or New Life Community Church. She'd really like to see us map out, which I thought was a good idea. Communities, organizations, neighborhoods, organizations, and businesses on a map, and really kind of think about, how could we help, how could we work together more and make more connections that way, and have a stronger connected community. And I think that might be the end of my list. So I'll share this entire document with you so you can take some time with it. But I think we're getting some good input from the different stakeholders.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah.
Glenda, unmute yourself. You're muted.
Okay, how many of
stop
the
sharing.
stakeholders live in Woodfin?
Oh, well, we have the interviewers here, the people that we interviewed.
Yes.
I would say, I'm not sure which of the ones that Adrian did, that like the Zen Tubing, they don't live in Woodfin, and neither does the Derek Turno with French Broad Outfitters, but he's got a business that operates there, right?
Right. No, I'm just curious how many live in Wood. I'm not taking away from their comments.
Yeah.
But I just am curious as to whether they actually live here. But
I would say, I guess, probably half or around half, but maybe, it's not, definitely, you're right. There's, of the ones that we just compiled here, I would expect half or maybe even more than half that don't live, but they do work in there, or they've got some business in the town. And this is a partial list. There are a number of other stakeholders. A number of the stakeholders ended up on the advisory committee, the steering committee, as well as the town board. And there's plenty that, if you want to discuss that offline, any of you, about, did you reach out to so-and-so, and I really think that'd be a good person to talk to, I think we'd be happy to go and have, talk with them and get some more input from folks. We did miss out on some because of Eric's transition, because he had a lot of connections and didn't get to do some of the interviews that he was planning to do. And we maybe could lean on him some more too. That's all.
Any other comments or questions for Linda? Okay. The next agenda item is the future land use map. And the future land use map will identify character areas based on the description of character areas that you guys have received, the draft you've received, and the revisions made after your comments will again guide that future land use map. The future land use map itself will then guide zoning decisions, rezoning decisions, and even development decisions. It won't be a mandatory regulation map. It will be a guidance and recommendation. The future land use map is probably one of the more tangible outcomes of the comprehensive planning process, and something where your input and guidance will be necessary and well received. Because just the one question that has come up already is based on the comments received from the surveys, the stakeholders, and just the general residents and business owners of Woodfin, is that the town needs a center. Well, the tough question is, where should that center be? What is the center of Woodfin? And I've lived around here, worked with Woodfin for, this year will be 33 years. And I don't know where the center of Woodfin is. So there was an attempt with Reynolds Village and to create that as a center, and the dream of having Merriman Avenue go through the center of Reynolds Village, and that didn't happen because of some DOT standards. I'm going to share my screen and pull up the character area definitions and descriptions, and we'll start with that. And your comments and thoughts with regard to these would certainly be welcome again. And one of your key tasks for the next couple of weeks will be reviewing this and providing the comments on it. But the town center character description, if you've looked at this, you can see it's very urban, mixed uses, no front setback. There's a build to line, which is yet to be determined. And again, these are recommendations at this point and would not be built into the zoning ordinance until changes, if approved, are made to that document. But, what I tried to do with the town center character area is describe a very urban type of area with minimum heights and maximum floor areas. And the reason for the maximum floor area is to keep one business from overwhelming the town center, and also to provide opportunities for local entrepreneurs and business people because of those smaller spaces. And I'm going to roll on through in town edge, around the edge of town, not quite as urban, and trying to make that transition to other land uses with not quite as intense use of properties, but still having that feel of more of a town center. And then corridor development is what I see as on Merriman Avenue, Weaverville Highway, outside the town center area, where it becomes, and maybe even at some of the future I-26 interchanges, some of the corridor development, which allows larger businesses, but also has the pedestrian connectivity throughout this, picking up on the survey responses and the comments we've heard from the stakeholders, trying to create more of a multimodal transportation system within the town of Woodfin by requiring quite a bit of pedestrian connectivity and sidewalks and greenways connecting different types of development. A riverway mixed-use commercial and small-scale industrial character area, which would, as the title states, be mapped along the riverway with artisan and craftsman manufacturing and industrial mixed-use buildings containing everything from offices and commercial to residential uses, and maximum heights of 3 stories to enable some construction in the flood fringe, where parking may be on the first floor, open parking like some near development along the riverfront, and commercial or residential. Above, again, pedestrian connectivity, both internal and to adjacent sites, and then different levels of residential from residential neighborhood, which would be a low to medium density with subdivisions and I have to admit I've become more of someone who appreciates density, because with density in residential, you can reduce the cost of the housing and also preserve more sensitive land areas by developing more densely in those areas that are appropriate for development. So please look at those density standards and let me know if you think they're appropriate, or are they too
Gerald, what are they, or where does this encompass? The entire residential neighborhood for where? Land use for the entire count? I mean, for the entire town of Woodfin?
well, these, when the future land use map is prepared, these character areas will be mapped in different parts of the entire town. Yes, the entire town. Not just, there won't be one character area for the entire town, but these various character areas would be mapped in what the steering committee thinks are appropriate locations. Does that answer your question?
Not really, but I'll talk to you offline again.
Yeah,
Just trying to get an
follow up with
idea
me.
of what they're really trying to accomplish here.
What we're trying to, and I think that's a good question. What we're trying to accomplish is a map that will then be useful in making decisions regarding rezonings or initial zoning if the entire zoning map is updated, and also to guide development decisions. If you as a developer could look at the future land use map and see something that's a piece of property that's identified as residential community, and that would mean if this is implemented and incorporated into the zoning ordinance, that development in that area should be no more than 10 dwelling units an acre with a mix of types of residential and the built form. So it's to be used as a guide. And I'd enjoy talking with you more about it offline. So when you have time, give me a call, or we can set up I think even face-to-face meetings are appropriate now, which would be good to get out and see people and talk about this. So if any of you want to discuss this offline and have questions, please let me know.
Gerald,
Yes.
one of the things that I'm finding difficult, if you will, and matter of fact, I'm heading to Kinko's later today to pick up some current zoning maps and the entire outline of Woodfin on a map that Adrian gave me. I'm pretty much a visual person, and looking at a sheet of paper, that's 8.5 by 11, I struggle with these issues. Is there a way that we could set up a space at town hall or the community center where we can have larger maps, not only to look at, but also then to hone in on issues in particular areas? And maybe I'm behind the 8 ball on this, but I've been kind of struggling with trying to get my arms around the borders of Woodfin and what's appropriate for each area.
I think that's good, and I like visuals too, large scale visuals. So I'll work with Adrian and Ryan and others at the town hall to produce those maps. I think it may, and I'll ask this question, there were several maps included in the introduction and infrastructure overview that I sent you. I think we should have large scale copies of those for your use and review. So we'll make copies of all those maps and the existing zoning map. And I think it will be important when I start drafting the future land use map that you have the ability to look at a large scale. So when that's being drafted, as we produce different drafts, I'll have copies of those made, large scale copies.
Thank you.
Put it at town hall. I think that's very good. It's hard to get a sense of things if you're looking at the same size computer screen as me. It's tough to get a good impression of the overall community and how these different character areas will relate to each other when we do the draft future land use maps. I appreciate that comment and question. We'll take care of it.
I want to make one comment. I think, where you do not have water and sewer, you have to have a lot more open space for housing. And I think even the new steep slope ordinance, has a lot of requirements about size of lots and things depending on the grade of the place. And I don't know, maybe that's way too detailed to get into this, but there are a lot of things that are going to affect land use going forward.
You're right. And with that, I'll make sure that as I work on the draft of the character area descriptions, that we have something in the residential neighborhood. This one has that we do conservation subdivisions, cluster development, and medium to large lots. And because of it's 5 dwelling units an acre maximum does not mean it needs to be 5 units. It could be a 2 acre lot minimum within that range. So maybe I'll refine that residential neighborhood a bit, keeping in mind the need to protect steep slopes and sensitive areas. But I appreciate that comment. Okay, and going on down, anytime any of you have a question or comment, let me know. There's residential community, which is basically medium density with a range of housing types. And then the next one I have is residential development, which is more multifamily and townhouse developments. And keeping this one, I think a key for the built form description is that it's located near major transportation corridors, because higher density, we want to make sure that the infrastructure is there to accommodate not only the water and sewer needs, but also the transportation needs. And again, pedestrian connectivity, sidewalks or greenways, both internally and externally. And we'll get into the
Gerald, do we get into getting like having traffic patterns or traffic studies or surveys done at this grade where we are from this level?
Not at this level. That would come up if these character areas are then used to form the foundation for revisions to the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance, through its development standards, require those surveys, the traffic impact studies, and that type of thing. So
okay.
We're still a few steps from requiring those and addressing those types of things.
Gotcha.
Gerald, just two quick questions, and maybe a little too granular for where we're at, but by the way, I thought this was great for somebody who's not used to thinking of it this way. These are great sort of building blocks, a way to describe each kind of use. I'm a little confused about why artisan buildings might not be in the town center, although there's probably a good reason for that. And later on, when you get into reserved lands, I wonder if there's should be a notation about wildlife corridors as part of the consideration set. That's all.
Okay, and your first comment, what type of buildings are not in the town center?
In the town center, artisan craft, I could see why industrial, but artisan craft things might be.
Okay,
might be
you're
somewhere.
right. I agree with you. So I'll go back and make that change. I think in the town center, we'd have to be aware of some of the, if this gets on down the line, if they are developed, just addressing safety issues. For example, if someone's doing forging or glass blowing or something with regard to or even pottery with kilns and so forth. But that's whole different. That gets into the type of detail that Scott and I were discussing before. That's way down the line, but we'll add artisan and crafts, manufacturing in downtown, because I think given the artisan and crafts movement in this area, that would be an important element in there, would add to the town center. Thanks. And then parks and open space, just those areas used for greenways, river access, even agriculture, though that's getting harder to find in the bounds of the town, and then the reserve lands. And Ken, you said this one, we should address wildlife corridors, so I'll add that. And that's it with regard to the character areas. Any other thoughts or comments before we go on to the next item on the agenda? I think the next item is just, can you see that new screen, or do I need to stop sharing the agenda item? Okay, let me do this. Okay, next is review the role of the steering committee. As I said, now your work is really going to start picking up, reviewing the character areas and providing comments on those, the intro that and overview of the infrastructure and some of the history of Woodfin, reviewing that to make sure it reflects what you think should be provided with regard to information about the town, edits. As Linda said, if there are other stakeholders that we should interview, any outreach that we should do to ensure we have the comments and the guidance from the community, working with the staff team on the future land use map as we start drafting the areas or the locations of the different character areas. Quite a bit of work coming up for you. Any questions regarding the role of the steering committee?
I got a question, Gerald, as it relates, and guys, I don't mean to beat the dead horse here, but we can come up with, in theory, the ways to operate central business districts, overlay districts, density, but at some point we're going to run out of talking points pretty quick if we haven't identified where the central business district is going to go here. And it's not just us identifying it, it's going to be who are the qualified people to tell us where the CBD needs to go, where is the highway expansion coming, where is the amount of traffic coming in and out of the CBD, are there tax benefits or tax breaks for that particular area? What are the logistics of a central business district that they're looking for this part of town? It's almost like we're going to be stopped real quick because we're going to have to build from the middle and then move out. And then we're going to have a river district, and we're going to have certain other areas. But at what point do we identify that central business district? Where is that in this process to get a clear definition from whom?
I think we're starting now. Look at, and the steps to take would be look at that character area description for the town center, see if you feel that's appropriate for the CBD, the central business district, and then we start identifying the appropriate location for it, which I think will be a significant challenge given the current development patterns and some of the restrictions we have to driving up and down Merriman Avenue, Weaverville Highway yesterday, looking at in Woodfin, looking at where it might be appropriate for it. And there again, the existing development pattern that would have to be redeveloped.
Do we know how much land? Do we know how much land we're looking for that particular component? Is it a 5 acre, a 12 acre, a 30 acre? What's going in it?
I'll give some examples from other communities of similar population and look at if there are standards for size of a town center to serve a town with a certain population to provide that information. But some of it is going to be trial and error. I think when we start with a certain size and it may be more limiting than needed, and we allow it to grow by having the town edges, the character area around it, which would allow that transition and that growth of the town center. You're asking some good questions, and I think that your questions emphasize how challenging it's going to be to identify the town center and not to downgrade Woodfin, but it was never a town like Weaverville or Black Mountain or Brevard or Hendersonville in terms of creating that town center 100 or more years ago. It was basically a thoroughfare going through a certain area, and then now we're trying to grow that town center. So how do we do that? To repeat your questions, how large should it be? Where should it be located? And my question, how do we transition from current development patterns to a more dense urban type development pattern along the corridor that has typically been historically been just a commercial strip development?
Yeah, can I add a comment?
Sure.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's coming up and over again, and it does really need it. It needs focus. It needs a little more research, I think, as you're saying, to bring some examples and thinking, and then some visuals with the map. It fits right in with the future, thinking about the future land use map. But I think, we probably want to, kind of really focus in on, maybe have a meeting focused on that, one of the next steering committee meetings, and also that would probably be, I think, as we take alternatives to the public next time, there's the opportunity for a wider input on maybe a couple different ideas about where it might work and what it might look like.
Yeah. Well, and I guess another question I would ask is, what is the expansion? What is the expansion by the town? Are they looking for ETJ on the other side of the river? What wants to happen as it continues to get bigger? Because right now it's set up so uniquely in between Asheville and Weaverville that it can take advantage of really not having to spend a boat ton of money on municipal stuff that can be taken from either north or the south. And you've got 3 really good arteries coming through. It's almost like there's going to be 3 separate districts. Anyway, it's the question is out there, but until we know where that is, it's really difficult to build, even from a size density perspective. So it's the only thing I know anything about. Sorry, that's about where I can offer my assistance.
Okay, and we'll take all the assistance you can offer, and look forward to discussing this further with you and the other steering committee members, because the questions you've raised are some of the ones that have gone through my head as I think about the town center and the development and growth that Woodfin is likely to see as this area continues to attract new residents.
Is there Gerald, is there a place we can also, while you're requesting stuff, perhaps see a list of inventory of land that the town currently holds that's under town's control? Maybe that would give opportunities for either horse trading or swapping, or if we want to get something to a central business district, how that would look.
Yeah, in that the 18-20 page report I sent you, which is the draft plan introduction and overview, and there's a map that shows publicly owned properties, and I'll send that out to everyone. It's a separate map.
Okay.
After this meeting, but that identifies the properties owned by the town, the county-owned properties, and also the state-owned properties within the town limits. And again, I'll send that out following this meeting, that map, to everyone on the committee.
Okay, thanks.
We're at agenda item number 8, which is comments and questions, and we've had some real good comments and questions. Any further questions, comments, thoughts? Then on to, yes.
I know we are running out of time, and this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I'm very involved in, and several of us are, in Woodfin Elementary School. there's a lot of background to share there and some current action items pending. If anybody'd like to reach out to my email, maybe we can set up a separate conversation about that. To the best of my knowledge, that is the only public school in Woodfin. It's not, Glenda?
Mhm.
I can't hear you.
No, and I don't know where the dividing line is, Judy, but I may have said this to Linda before, I can't remember who, that we really need to talk to Buncombe County Schools because all the kids in my neighborhood go to Weaverville. And
Well,
there's I think it's a fairly significant number. So,
and that's where I'm headed,
okay.
like tomorrow if possible. So like I said, if anybody wants to be part of that conversation, I don't want to take up time today on that, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Our next steps will be drafting the goals and recommendations and based on the survey responses, the interviews with stakeholders and your comments, and then drafting the future land use map. And I think Linda had a good point about maybe our next meeting, we focus just on the land use map, future land use map with the emphasis on the town center, because it's going back to what Scott said, we have to start with that center and build out from there to have a realistic future land use maps. Some fairly significant task ahead of us. And I look forward to working with you on those and really give some thought to that issue of the town center and where it should be. And the question I have is what's the role of Reynolds Village as we draft the future land use map? And again, thinking back to what, now 12, 15 years ago when Reynolds Village was being envisioned, again, there was thoughts that could be the town center and didn't work out. So how do we address that? How do we identify a location for the appropriate location for the town center? And how do we then evolve from the current development pattern to a more urban, more for the town center? And this gets in. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Why can't the Reynolds Village Town Center be the town center? I mean, it's already built. It seems like it's suited for that purpose. Is it just identified as Reynolds Mountain and not part of Woodfin? Is that the issue, or is it a specific ordinance or zoning thing?
That's the question I have. So I look forward to the comments and responses from the steering committee on that question. I think that's a very good question, Will, and it certainly went through my head. So I'd like to hear comments from others with regard to that question.
It seems
Thanks.
to make sense, Will. I mean, they've got everything there. But Gerald, when you mentioned the DOT issues prior, was that because they were trying to bring the DOT road right through the middle of Reynolds, or it was about the widening of Merriman itself?
I think it was a combination, and also there was a idea to have a roundabout where Woodfin Avenue, the intersection of Woodfin Avenue, and there at the traffic signal, and the topography would not allow it. I think it was the topo and the grade issues and rights of ways not enable that to make it easier to get into Reynolds Village. So I'll check further into that with DOT and see if there are any issues or challenges with trying to make the center of I think it's trying to remember the name of the street, the main street through Reynolds Village, make that Woodfin's main street. So I'll be back with, I hope, some answers to some of those questions you asked with regard to any issue DOT has with it. I would like to hear when we maybe at our next steering committee meeting address that question that we'll ask and about the role of Reynolds Village.
I have one other comment. Is it not possible to use the Buncombe County survey that was so recently done as a consideration for our goals and recommendations?
We could certainly, yeah, we can use that as one of the information sources. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Looking at our, our Excel sheet with regard to the project schedule, I think the next steering committee meeting is identified on that is June. That may be a bit far out for some of the tasks that we have. So let's think about sometime in May. At this point for our next meeting, I'll follow up with an email after I talk with Adrian and Linda, our staff team, a bit more. But again, I think Linda had a very good idea to focus on the future land use map at our next steering committee meeting, and with a particular emphasis on that town center, and it may even be sooner than that. It is even late April for the next meeting. I'd like to keep the schedule for our next meeting a bit open based on the progress we make with the future land use map, and when that's ready to be discussed and your input provided in a focused meeting, if that's okay. Okay. I'll take that as a yes, and then any other comments, questions, thoughts as we approach the end of this meeting?
Thank
Do
you all for
wanna-
putting this together.
Yeah. So for providing comments and feedback on the future land use map, forgot to call it the little units. Are you going to share that as a team doc or a Google doc? If you want comments on that,
I'll probably do it as a Google Doc, because I agree with you. It's a little easier to access it. So I'll try that Google Doc.
Okay.
And
great.
And again, your task now are to look at the intro and the overview, the history, and provide thoughts and comments regarding that. Look at the character area descriptions, comment and provide thoughts on that. Think about the question that was asked with regard to the town center and the role Reynolds Village plays in that town center of Woodfin, and continue to identify ways for us to outreach. If you know other stakeholders, I think comment about looking at Buncombe County survey responses and considering those, which is great. So any other thoughts or ideas you have about outreach and how to continue our efforts to get the thoughts and opinions of the residents and business owners in Woodfin and make sure they're incorporated in our planning efforts is key. So, thanks for the time and your willingness to assist in this endeavor and your commitment to the town of Woodfin. Any other questions or thoughts before we end the meeting?
Just one, Gerald, if you need help in any way with getting the Buncombe survey information, let me know. I suspect you don't have a problem, but let me know if you do.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, Ken. Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
You guys take care.
Okay.
Great.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.